Host Craig Pera, and I want to welcome you to my live stream. Today, we are going to be talking about cognitive distortions. You may have seen this topic come up if you've been following my lives. We're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. We're going to do it again. This topic is so important, and I want to make sure I get it right, and I want to leave everybody with an understanding. All right, here we go. Ready? Welcome to Sex Afflictions and Porn Addictions. I am your host, Craig Pera, the founder of the Mindful Habit System. And my job is to help you men create healthy sexuality and a great life. And that's what we want to do here. And this podcast is for the men, and this podcast is for the women. And this is the second time that I'm doing this broadcast. And I'll tell you why we're doing it again. Because what we're talking about, as I started to speak regarding the cognitive distortions that the guys have and the cognitive distortions that the partners have, it reinforced the reality that I'm not just talking about cognitive distortions. I am literally talking about the line where husband and wife are literally experiencing reality differently. And so here's what we're going to do today. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what a cognitive distortion is. And then I'm going to share some common cognitive distortions that partners have. And then I'm going to share some common cognitive distortions that the guy has. And I want to set up a future broadcast where I am going to hit the primary cognitive distortions that he has, that she has. And here, let me start with the reality, right? Here's the reality. Let's talk about the man who is lying about some aspect of his sexual expression, PMO, porn, masturbation, orgasm, okay? From the guy's perspective, you have at a biological level a wiring for variety. At the biological level, you have a wiring for visual, which is why they believe more men watch porn than women. And then you look at the social conditioning around what we receive, different messages around sex. Let me cut to the chase and then we'll back into it. The reality is that the man and the women are experiencing two very different realities. Very, very different realities. On the one perspective, right, from the guy's perspective, and this is not an excuse. This is an understanding and awareness of the problem that we are trying to solve. And of course, everybody is different. This may or may not apply to you. I am sharing on this broadcast generalizations that I've learned through my own personal experience and working with a very particular category of people that have been drawn to me over the years. So this may or may not apply to you. If it does, great. If it doesn't, shh. And certainly nothing I say should replace medical advice when working with a counselor, therapist, and/or psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever it is you need to be successful. But from the men, let's just cut right to it quick. The oldest and most impactful habit in his life, right? Him lying about some aspect of his sexual expression, the oldest and most impactful habit in this man's life. And if you are joining me live, that is awesome. Hey, Rob, what's up, everybody? If you're not joining me live and want to join me live, follow me on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, LinkedIn, Twitter, now known as X, okay? So from the partner's perspective, him lying about some aspect of his sexual expression is killing her, is destroying her soul. She is experiencing what's called betrayal trauma. So on one hand, you've got the oldest and most impactful habit. On the other hand, you've got deep, deep wounds being touched by him lying about some aspect of his sexual expression, porn, masturbation, orgasm. And we've got the sensitivities around sex in our society. We've got the shame around sex in our society. We have the inherent differences between male sexuality and female sexuality. You have often a spiritual reality where that sexuality is shamed. So what we have, and by the way, which is why one of the primary criticisms of the sex and porn addiction model, and guys, you know this to be true, it distorts, certainly distorts. However we got here, whoever brought you to this broadcast, right? Whoever you got here, there's a reality where there are two people part of the solution. Husband and wife are part of the solution. And when you're only treating his sex addiction or porn addiction, there is implicit in that is if he stops doing something, everything's going to be okay. And that is a profound reality misinterpretation. Like, that is wrong for most people. Because this is a complicated problem that requires two people moving back towards each other, recognizing that in the talking about it, in the experience of it, you are touching core wound, hence these cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions, think about them as like verbal or environmental inflammatories. So he lies about something stupid, and partner receives that lie, like woof, inflammation, right? Big part is awakened, where there's a lot of negative energy. You will find cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are the filters that color our reality. And here are some examples of cognitive distortions. Catastrophizing. This is when you imagine the worst possible outcome or believe that a situation is worse than it actually is, right? An example of catastrophizing is, he's destroyed me. I hear that. I hear strong, powerful women who have overcome so much in their lives. This touches such a deep wound. I'm destroyed. Now, when push comes to shove, not when push comes to shove, as that partner's work continues, as they heal, as they grow, not on my watch. No, not gonna happen. He is not going to destroy me. I don't have to react that way. Right? I control how I respond. And that is a very powerful awakening moment for the partners when they embrace that reality. But there's an example of a cognitive distortion, a catastrophizing. Another one is, this relationship is never going to get better. Our relationship is doomed. And it is also an example of the potential harm in examining, trying to solve a complicated problem through the narrow lens of sex addiction and porn addiction. When that becomes the primary metric for the individual, wrong track. Primary metric for the couple, whether or not he does or does not do something, when that becomes the primary metric, everybody's on the wrong track. I am a big catastrophizer. Here's another one. Overgeneralization. This distortion leads to taking one instant and applying it broadly. And here's something a spouse might think. For example, if the addicted person slips once, or if the person finds himself nibbling around the edges, right? Let's do the perfect outcome. Finds himself nibbling around the edges, tells his partner he's nibbling around the edges. Partner receives that as, that's a slip. You're never going to get better. This is how it's always going to be. One, there's some catastrophizing, and there's also an overgeneralization. Because from the partner perspective, when he shares that with you, of course his sexual energy is going to be pulled in an unhealthy direction. He's a human, he's a male human. Decades of programming, condition, uh, genetics, environment, evolution, training, society, family of origin, trauma, shame, stress management, fear, physiology. His sexual energy will be pulled in an unhealthy direction. And when he can acknowledge that, put those brakes on and share it, right? When the partner catastrophizes, what happens? And I'm not saying it's right, but what does he do? Psst, he zips it up, isn't going to say it again. So, and again, because the wounds are so raw, and this is what the man has to understand, from your perspective, this might be the oldest and most impactful habit in your life, hiding about some aspect of your sexual expression since you were a child. For her, this is touching deep wounds. You need to understand why she's feeling this way, right? You can eat, well, it's not cheating. I define cheating this way, you define cheating that way, right? That's not an argument you're gonna win, and it's not an argument you want to win. Instead of that fight, understand why she feels that way. What's her biology? What's her belief systems? What wounds is this touching? And when you to see a wound, look for a cognitive distortion. Here's another cognitive distortion: personalization. The partners sometimes blame themselves for the addiction or believe that they are the cause of their partner's behavior. How many partners listening to this right now have blamed themselves? And every partner who's further along down the line, almost every partner that I've ever worked with has this awakening, this reality, like, oh my God, this has such little to do with me. That is its own source of offense. But you've personified it. You've personalized it, right? If I were more attractive, my partner wouldn't need to do this. The field is ripe with famous celebrities with beautiful model wives either cheating or getting addicted to pornography. That is unfortunately not a factor. And let me say that the right way. When the man is in that tunnel, he is not thinking about his partner. Right? The reason he is using porn to numb, cope, and escape. May there be some relationship issues. There are always intimacy issues. May there be some libido gap issues. Yes. There's always a relationship dynamic that needs to be improved upon. But this behavior predated you by decades, most likely, in almost all cases. Oldest and most impactful. Oldest and most impactful. We're talking eating habits, wiping your butt habits, cleaning habits, using sex as a coping strategy to escape discomfort, pain, porn, and hiding it. Oldest and most impactful habit. And deep wounds from the partner's perspective. So here's another cognitive distortion: mind reading. Right? This is when someone believes they know the thoughts or intentions of others without any concrete evidence. Sometimes I hear, he should know. He should know? Give me evidence in support of he should know. What data do you have for that conclusion? He doesn't know. Right? So the spouse might assume what the addict partner is thinking or feeling without asking, leading to misunderstandings and false conclusions. Whenever you find yourself mind reading, and especially when you as a partner start attributing intentionality, like he's doing this to harm me, or there's some intention regarding his behavior, an intention to be cruel or an intention to be mean, that has rarely ever been present with any of my clients. In fact, these men are really trying. They're being proactive, and maybe they were forced here, but trying to do something about it. That intentionality isn't there. These are the same men who would take a bullet for their partners, jump in front of a car for their partners. So be mindful of that, what intention you're attaching to that behavior, that mind reading, what you're attributing. And the solution is to get curious, ask questions. Now, he's not going to be able to answer them. This isn't like instant, it takes a lot of work to build and cultivate that emotional intelligence. And that's why we have programs like ours that include 6 calls per week, 3 one-on-one sessions, a counselor with a master's in clinical psychology giving you, regular feedback in response to, all of your assignments, the partner. That's, I'm just saying, right? There's a reason for that level of support, because that's what it takes to change these deeply entrenched belief systems for some people. But for those of you listening, just for yourselves and for your partners, look for those cognitive distortions. Here's another one: should statements. These are self-imposed rules about how you or others should behave, right? He should be able to control this. He shouldn't need that kind of stimulation. He should be able to control this. Now, I respect that being a belief system. However, as the attorney in me says, Your Honor, may it please the court, I would like to argue in opposition to that point and highlight why, in fact, he absolutely, in that decision moment, has completely surrendered control to his addict part, and by all present day understandings is not in control as we understand it today. I would like to begin with the factors of biology, of evolution, of his childhood programming, the lying, the compartmentalizing, the sexual shame, maybe sexual trauma, maybe adverse childhood experiences, maybe child abuse, maybe neglect, that contributed to the lying, the compartmentalizing, the lack of empathy, the low self-esteem, the attachment issues, the hiding. How could he hide? How could he lie like that? My response, kindly and lovingly, is let's look at the data. How could he not? This is a guy who is afraid to be honest about, what he likes and who he is, and doesn't has actually lost the sense of being proactive in meeting his needs. And so sometimes is somewhere on the spectrum of a personality disorder, maybe depressed, maybe anxious, maybe has a high adverse childhood experience score. Everyone should take their ACE quiz, adverse childhood experience quiz, that measures the presence of different types of adverse childhood experiences, a metric. So when we talk about that decision point and the conditioning around that decision point, and I don't mean to be, sound like I'm making excuses, ever. I don't want to make excuses. But one of the things I'm great at is helping people connect deeply, quickly with the problem that they're trying to solve. And so those should statements really inaccurately reflect the reality of what's necessary to overcome that oldest and most impactful habit: lying about some aspect of his sexual being, and then let alone getting to intimacy and connection. Like, I can't believe he's not vulnerable. Of course he's not vulnerable. His vulnerability was punished. When he was a child, that vulnerability was actually beaten out of him, into him, out of him. So that hiding, the conditioning around the lying, the conditioning around the compartmentalization, the conditioning around the lack of empathy around this issue, oh my God. We're literally talking about two different realities. Husband and wife are experiencing two different realities. And I want to help both people understand the reality that they're experiencing and not make excuses. But I thought I should use that opportunity to highlight the harm of those should statements for you and how they might inaccurately reflect the nature of the challenge that you are actually trying to solve. And part of solving that challenge from a husband and wife perspective, getting that energy, directing that energy towards each other. Oh my God, you're talking intimacy, you're talking connection, you're talking vulnerability. How about one of the hardest things for most people to do in their lives? Yes, and Charlotte says in the chat correctly, appropriately, right? This problem started long before your relationship began. And again, not an excuse. Please, please, please. We don't make excuses here. We don't make excuses. But we do uh, develop a deep understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve. And the problem isn't just not doing something. Because to break a habit, you have to make the right habit that meets the right need. So let's get back to cognitive distortions. I can keep going off in tangents. Labeling, right? And for many good reasons, the partners are so deeply wounded, pervert, loser, sicko, disgusting. And I, again, absolutely have great respect and honor the pain that causes those words to come out of your mouth. Is it serving you? Right? It uh, when a light shined, under the light of day, you will find cognitive distortions. You will find that those labels are eroding empathy and understanding and helping you avoid mental rigidity. That stuck thinking. And be aware to really, really understand what's going on. Here's something else we all do, men and women. Here is the I think physiologically wired cognitive distortion. And by the way, these cognitive distortions, these automatic, instantaneous defense mechanisms, operative words, automatic, instantaneous. Most of us don't have control. You might get the control post cognitive distortion. You may use your awareness of the cognitive distortion to snap out of it, but you're going to have that cognitive distortion. I have yet to meet anybody who says, "Oh no, 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 I don't think these things ever. I don't never have cognitive distortions. I never think something negative about my spouse. I never project mother onto wife." Guys, come on. We do it all the time. We got to be aware of it and stay ahead of it. And the more trauma there is, the more projecting. The more trauma, the more projecting. So, discounting the positive. This is focusing only on the negative aspects of the situation and failing to acknowledge any positive progress or attributes in the relationship or the addicted person. And you know where this happens? This happens when partners demand no slips. And no slips, masturbation, no porn. And of course, that's the goal, right? That's the goal. But when you look at the training and the conditioning, what often happens is that bold aspiration, which is completely unattainable in the sense, of course, he's going to find himself wandering his mind, right? Of course, he's going to catch himself as he finds himself nibbling around the edges. Oldest and most impactful habit, right? We are not wired for this, ladies. We are not wired, and many of the women aren't wired it from the shopping, erotic fiction, gambling is a growing concern. So for all of us, we're all social media, more social media, the more depression, right? We're not wired for this. And you can take, for an example, a guy, let's say, who had this best track record that he's ever had in his life, taking great care of himself for 30 days and no PMO for 30 days, and has a slip And it's like everything goes back to square one. And I respect that that slip is touching deep wounds, but again, it means very different to you than it does for him. And we want to create a culture. If we looked at it from a business perspective, should we, rigidly shut down any discussion regarding, the core problem we're trying to solve? No, we want conversation around that. And listen, it's hard. It's hard. I don't want to propose for a second it's easy, but I want to highlight the lenses through which we're experiencing these cognitive distortions have a great impact on the outcomes that we're able to create. And so here, let's do some of the cognitive distortions from the men. It's just a few minutes of watching minimization. We're talking about minimization, or it's just porn, or it's not cheating. Well, I understand that might meet your definition, but you've got a partner who says it is. And when you learn why she feels that way, well, I feel that when you watch porn, you're going to condition yourself to be attracted to those women, losing attraction towards me. And as you get older, more and more of that energy that goes to pornography, less and less of it is going towards me. It makes me feel insecure. I may believe it's a sin, so we'll add that on top of it. But I want to kind of take that out of it and look at the other reasons. When that energy is going there, it's not coming towards me. And the data is overwhelming that for husband and wife, when that energy's husband, wife, when that energy is going towards each other, the unit's happier and healthier. Surprise, surprise. Right? So she may not be saying it that way, but there's a reason why they feel that way. And it's important for you to understand that because it's very natural for us to minimize. Also very natural for us to rationalize. Every guy does it. Look at the data. It's completely overwhelming. And also let's look at the data. Do we think we're on the right track? Do we think what these young boys are watching is good for them? Is healthy? Is it teaching them consent? Is it teaching them sexual pleasure? Is it teaching them body autonomy? No, it's teaching them that women like to be violated violently and somehow that feels good for them. No kink shame, no judgment. There's a lot of rationalization. And I think many people, if you're here, are awakening from that rationalization that, wait a minute, it is harmful for some people. It is harmful for me. A recognition that you're talking about one of the most powerful forces in human nature. How are you going to channel and how are you going to direct that force? So rationalization. Another one, magical thinking, right? I can stop whenever I want. That's an example of a cognitive distortion of magical thinking. I just choose not to do it right now, right? Tricking yourself, fantasizing, overgeneralization. I relapse once, that means I will never get better. The longer that your core metric is not doing something, the longer you're on the wrong path. Your core metric must be doing something else. To break a habit, you have to make the right habit that meets the right need. Mind reading, right? We do this too. People can tell I'm addicted just by looking at me. Or they know I'm a bad person. They know I'm worthless. They know. Now, here's the thing. I was going to make an example with your partners and say, my wife, will say, I know he's acted out. Or I know something's wrong. Do you know why they know that more often than not? Because they have a higher EQ, generally speaking, a higher emotional intelligence. They can see the compartment forming. They can tell a part has awakened. They don't have the vocabulary, or some do if they learn about it. But that's they can feel it. They can sense it. So back to cognitive distortions, black and white thinking. If I can't be perfect, then there's no point in trying at all. If I can't be perfect, there's no point in trying at all. You will never be perfect. The road to success is paved with the bricks of failure. Get rid of mental rigidity. Get rid of black and white thinking. A common attribute of many mental health diagnoses is that mental rigidity. Stuck thinking. Stuck thinking. Another cognitive distortion is called blaming. If my partner was more available, more attractive, or more understanding, more open to the moves that I want to do, I wouldn't need to turn to porn. How about take accountability for addressing those issues as a man, being proactive, right? Mustering up the courage to have that conversation and have a disagreement and hold space for that disagreement without blaming, right? We can own the outcome without taking responsibility for someone else's actions, right? We can own the outcome without taking responsibility for someone else's actions. I don't know about you guys, but I love cognitive distortions. I love identifying them. I love, here's what it's doing for clients. It's helping them have some compassion because where before was a response that might be labeled asshole, jerk, right? The negative reactions that we're trying to avoid, right? Nobody wants to shut down when their partner asks them a question. Nobody wants to have all these cognitive distortions when she raises her voice or has some negative energy because you're projecting mother. So the more that each person can understand your these distortions, these cognitive distortions, the better able you are to clean the filter. Clean the filter, respond in a way that empowers you to create the right outcome. Michelle says in our partner program, she encourages the partners to manipulate the situation to their outcome. That's a word we use there. We don't use it on the guy side because it does have some negative connotation for Michelle and the other ladies. There's a sense of empowerment or because they felt so manipulated, right? So there's a way, there's positivity around that word, but it's what Michelle likes it and what a number of the women in the program like about it is I can apply it to I can create the outcome. It's empowering, right? It's empowering. And when a message to partners is that it is often too that when I explain his programming, when I explain, well, tell me, why does he lie? And here's the, not the excuse, but here's the origin story. Yes, origin story. Like as superheroes or villains, they have an origin story. Our parts have an origin story. His addict part has an origin story. His liar part has an origin story. So when I share things like this is the oldest and most impactful habit, I swear to you and pledge to you, it is not so you lower your standards. It is not for you to accept his behavior, but it's to help everybody who's working towards solving this problem to be aware of what it is you are actually solving. And there is a very important reality that I think gets lost a lot. That is that there are two people experiencing this behavior through a very, very, very different lens. Very different lens. And understanding that allows you to understand where the cognitive distortions are. So it's information, not ammunition. So how do you find cognitive distortions? When do you get triggered? When do you experience that inflammatory response? What are the thoughts that you're having when you have that cognitive distortion? And for those of you further along in your journey in doing your parts work, what part was awakened? Because here's the thing about cognitive distortion. Now, when you read the definition online, you will say, rooted in fallacy, but they're not rooted in fallacy are they? Sometimes they're rooted in fact. That's what makes the distortion, the illusion, so appealing in the moment. There's some fact, right? He should do this better, right? I feel like a failure because I haven't been successful. There's truth, and it's distorted. It's not helping. It's making it worse. It's feeding on itself. It's ultimately a negative response. And when you look at the physiology around that cognitive distortion, it is not the physiology of joy, the physiology of connection. It's the physiology of fear. Think about that for a second, right? Whenever there's conflict, whenever you have one of these cognitive distortions and you have this automatic, instantaneous part that takes over and reacts with this self-defense mechanism, train, condition, response, automatic, instantaneous, like a physical or a medical condition. Yeah, great point in the chat. It's like a physical or medical condition. And again, not an excuse, but when you look at it from that perspective, you first of all, you realize like sobriety is such a teeny part of the solution. And I'm talking to you men now, right? when you really look at what's happening within those cognitive distortions, what's underlying the lying, the hiding, the insecurity, the shame, the fear around asserting yourself, and you may assert yourself like a jerk, like an asshole, like a mean person with anger, or even assert yourself by shutting down. But are you standing in your truth? Are you meeting your needs proactively? Are you addressing conflict? And of course, the answer is no, because we were trained terribly to do these things. Terrible, terrible training. And I like that lens too. Anybody in therapy, anybody in counseling, and certainly anybody in the mindful habit program, they are in training. It is a training on how to live, how to address the realities of these cognitive distortions. The reality of this automatic, instantaneous defense mechanism, this fear of physiology-based defense mechanism that causes me to catastrophize. Right? And here's the other thing. I'll leave you with this. You will come to see and understand that there are no bad parts, and these reactions are parts trying to meet needs in the way that they were trained. So that's going to land with some of you. Let me just say it again. You're going to learn that these bad habits are parts trying to meet needs in the way they were trained. So this judging yourself, this beating yourself up, this negative narrative that is literally poisoning your genome, epigenetics, look it up, literally poisoning your mind, your body, and spirit, making it worse. So if you agree the cognitive distortion's automatic, instantaneous, when you get triggered and say that thing that you regret, automatic, instantaneous. Be kind to yourself. Love yourself always, and do everything you can to not have negative thoughts, but be able to, like a river, shift and direct and not attach to those negative thoughts, and address those deeper underlying issues. So there exists a reality where, flaws, warts and all, you love yourself 100%. I like to say to myself, I love every cell. I love every space between cells. Despite horrific mistakes, transgressions against humanity, horrible mistakes. I love myself and I forgive myself because that's the only outcome that's going to prevent me from not doing the same things that brought me here. So when you have that cognitive distortions, let it be a call to action. It has to be a call to action because you're not going to get rid of the cognitive distortions. They must become calls to action, calls to love yourself, calls to recognize a wound has been touched. Think about that. Every cognitive distortion that you have, it means a wound has been touched. If it didn't mean a wound, if a wound wasn't touched, you wouldn't have the cognitive distortion. You would talk about the issue like I'm talking to you now in a normal tone. You say, "Oh no, I actually think it's the remote that is the one that we should use because this is the one that comes with the television." Right? There'd be no energy. There'd be no reaction, but that's not what happened. What happened is, pow, the physiology of fear. Energy shift in the body from positive to negative. Shut down. Get aggressive. Be big. Be small. Hide. Numb. Cope. Escape. All right? Automatic, instantaneous. So use those cognitive distortions as beacons, as opportunities to help you wake up. Wake up and learn to love yourself, and in the process, be better at loving others. Thank you so much for listening. That concludes our broadcast today on cognitive distortion for him and cognitive distortion for her. You can tell early on that we touched on some really heavy cognitive distortions. And for my lady listeners, I want you to know that I am working on that broadcast. And I want to do it in a way where you, the partner, feel seen, where you feel supported, and where you do not feel like I'm making excuses for him. And that's what sometimes happens when we talk about the different realities that these behaviors are being experienced. So that's my commitment to you, is to doing my best job there. I look forward to that. I hope you get great value. Where there is an inflammatory response, I promise you, you will find a cognitive distortion. When you find a cognitive distortion, you will find a wound being touched. Let that be the call to action to treat that wound. Keep feeding the right wolf. Embrace your power of choice. And thank you so much for listening. And I'll catch you on the next broadcast. Bye, everybody. And last but not least, men, if you are struggling and you want structure, you want guidance, you want weekly access to be able to ask me questions, use the coupon code podcast for the self-study program. You get 36% off. Ladies, if you're listening, whether your husband's on this journey with you or not, I hope he is, but we have a partner empowerment program for you. You can visit the website, mindfulhabithelp.com, and you can see the partner program. You can sign up on your own. That program is designed to help you heal and move forward with or without him. Okay? Thanks, everybody.